Three, two, one. Hello, and welcome to another U.S. Tech Workers podcast. I am your host, Kevin Lynn, and today is Wednesday, April the 3rd, 2019. And today I am joined by tech worker Adele Smith. Adele, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
It's great to have you here. And Adele, we're going to talk, I'm going to jump right in because there's some breaking news we need to talk about, and I think our community would really like to be informed more on. So this is a newspaper headline from yesterday. It was in the Investor Place, but I've also seen it in Fortune magazine, and the headline reads, Intel layoffs 2019. Chip giant confirms big job cuts. So Intel announced that it is enacting a new round of layoffs, a new round here, as the company announced that it will consolidate some of its operations under Indian IT contractor Infosys. The Santa Clara, California-based tech business did not say exactly how many IT workers will lose their jobs as part of the decision, but multiple sources at Intel say the figure is in the hundreds. So these are good jobs, and all I see anymore are American workers getting displaced, and these third-party firms, whether they be an Infosys, a Tata Consultancy Services, an HLC, a Ernst & Young, a Capgemini, coming in and basically contracting, outsourcing the workers, and this is crazy. Adele, what is going on?
Yeah, this has been going on for a long time, Kevin. This is nothing new. You know, it's in thinking about, our conversation tonight, I was thinking about, when this first started back in the 1990s, I think that really did target people who probably were not the top performers and probably were on their way out the door anyway. But now it's targeting it. These are very deep cuts, and these are targeting people who are productive, who just probably are bewildered and baffled as to why they're being targeted and laid off. And in some cases, and probably in a lot of cases, there's nothing to do with their age or their performance. It's the wrong company at the wrong point in time.
It's interesting you say that. I was talking to Dina Moore. Dina Moore is a tech worker, a veteran tech worker who had been some 12 years at Disney. And when they called her into the office, she thought she was going to be promoted. I mean, this is a woman with a dozen Microsoft certifications, no SQL like the back of her hand, and they canned her and told her to train her replacement. I mean, my gosh.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been like this for a long time. But it's spreading. It's really spreading. I mean, yes, the Intel story is tragic. I mean, it's just really it's surprising. But I also have to say, though, that it's not just isolated to IT. And I know the purpose of what you wanted to talk about was the Intel cuts. But in the New York City area, the H-1Bs in accounting and finance in some parts of New York City outnumber the IT jobs.
Really?
So that train is moving. I mean, that H-1B displacement train is moving from stop to stop to stop. First it was IT, now it's accounting, now it's finance, and it's going to be other things, and who knows when it's going to end.
It's interesting. Just the other week, it was about 2-3 weeks ago, Congresswoman Axne from the Des Moines area of Iowa was grilling then CEO of Wells Fargo about the 400 jobs that were being cut in the Des Moines area. And Wells Fargo said, well, we're just cutting jobs. But in reality, the Congresswoman had proof that these jobs are being offshored to the Philippines. In fact, they were flying Americans to the Philippines to train they're the people that would be doing their job. I mean, they're not even bringing over the H-1B workers, contracting out and doing the knowledge transfer. They're here. They're just getting rid of that middle function. It's crazy.
It's disturbing, but the only way to stop it is to get involved and to fight back and to stand up and to make sure you're active. And political activism, whether it's grassroots or any other way, is that's the only way to stop it. That's the only way to affect any real change.
Because it's interesting you say that. I've been frustrated a bit myself in trying to motivate tech workers to get involved politically. And you have to, like you said, they have to do grassroots action. And that is not doing snarky tweets and Facebook messages. What it is engaging your local elected representatives on the federal, state, and local levels. That's who needs to hear from you. Even if, let's say, they co-sponsor really bad bills like HR 1044, they still need to hear from their constituents.
Yeah, and some of them don't want to hear from their constituents, and I found that out the hard way.
You want to tell us about that, Adele?
Yeah, I had tried a number of times with actually a friend of mine who lives in a very prominent congresswoman's district, and I live in New York, and they wouldn't respond, and my own congresswoman wouldn't respond. It was outright hostile, and it's amazing, and yet they find time to meet with the foreign lobbies and the tech lobbies, and yet not their own constituents, and there really should be something that we should do about it. And I don't like to accept the fact that somebody just tells me that that's just the way it is, because it's wrong, and it shouldn't be that way. And of course, not all congressmen are that way, but at least the ones in New York are. And I'll speak for. It's disturbing.
Wow. Too, in addition to political activism, there are things that we recommend people do. For instance, I work closely with John Miano, who wrote the book Sold Out. And when people, for instance, these folks at Intel, we should be hearing from all, whether it's 100 or 200 of them, the first thing they need to do is get a lawyer. I would recommend John Miano because he's very familiar with this. He does have lawsuits, again, at various federal courts on these issues. But get a lawyer. If you go to a law firm as a single tech worker or a single accountant who's been laid off, they'll look at you and go, well, that's interesting. But if you're 100 or 200, they're looking at the potential of winning on behalf of that many plaintiffs. Their fees will be 100 times greater. It's really something they could get excited about. And so that's one thing they should do. I believe tech workers, or really information workers, white collar workers, need to start to unionize. This is one way to combat this kind of offshoring and displacement that's going on. And
it's probably very difficult for them to do that. They've got to prove that they're in a very protective class. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the details of it. But I do know a woman who was let go of Cisco, and Cisco is notoriously bad when it comes to foreign visa abuse. And she was, I think she was in her early 60s. So, she definitely was in a protected age class, but she was out on short-term disability leave for a surgery. She broke her leg and came back and was fired the next day. And so she was even reluctant to fight back. I mean, for me, I would have launched I would have launched a campaign against them. I definitely wouldn't have just accepted that. But it's very frustrating that people in general don't want to be bothered standing up for themselves, even when they do have a case.
Right. So, and even if it's difficult, it may not be that interesting. I know one tech worker who was laid off himself, and he sought out an attorney. The attorney sent a letter to the financial services company that he was working at, and they ended up paying him $75,000. So,
Wow.
you know,
Yeah, sometimes that's all it takes is just the willingness to step in and fight back. But the other thing though too is this is where the grassroots activism comes in. Every single time there's got to be an awareness, and what has to happen in my opinion, I'm just going to disclaim this by being my opinion. I'm a big believer in marketing, and you know, in any marketing anything, there's got to be a personal story behind it. And that's how all these lobbyists are being so successful. They're telling the personal story of people, you know, of for example, the Indians in the queue who've been living here for 10 years who want to get their green card. Those are very personalized stories. We need to do the same thing. So there has to be somebody, for example, and this is like the guerrilla marketing approach of a group of people. Every single time there's a layoff announced, they're the SWAT team that goes out there with cameras to talk to these people. Maybe it's anonymous. Maybe the people don't declare their name. Maybe they fuzzy their face on the video, but talk to them about their story. Talk to them about it. Get it out there in the news, and get it out there in the media, and that way it's personalized. So we hear about all these things that are anecdotal, but nothing is really publicized. And I don't understand or know why. I don't understand or know why it's so difficult to get people to do that.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things John Miano talks about, because we were talking earlier about what to do when you've been, we call H1 booted, you know, also gather intelligence. You know, what you need to be doing is, you know, imagine if you're like the 400 people laid off in Des Moines, Iowa, if they march down the street to the local president's office, that's going to attract a lot of news and media. And
Exactly.
Yep. And they need to be keeping a record of who's showing up to take their job, save all the memos that they receive, look for any labor condition applications for H-1B workers that they see, make things like this, gather all this intelligence, and by all means, take copious notes of any conversations you have with your manager during this process where they are displacing you. You know, those are really important things.
Yep, I agree. All the above, yeah.
Yeah. So, boy, if we can, you know, again, it would be just, I think if we could just get tech workers and just workers in general to fight these situations when they happen. And let's say if they've happened in the past, they need to be talking to their electeds and making them understand that, like you were saying, I have a story. You know, I was unemployed for a year and a half as a result of this. I lost my home. I lost this and this and that. These are the stories that our electeds need to be hearing.
I agree with you, but I think that I'm going to, you know, make a suggestion to your statement. It's not just tech workers. It's a lot of workers and a lot of industries. And that's why I'm a big believer. And the message has got to get out that there's a train that's picking up speed. It's a freight train, and it's making stops along the way. And eventually it's going to stop at your job.
That's a great metaphor, Adele. I love that metaphor. And I think parents sending their kids to college, when you look at the fact that 84% of these H-1B visa applications that go out are for jobs in the skill levels 1 and 2 areas, where these are quite ordinary workers, and they're competing directly with our college graduates and people who've been in the workforce a short period of time.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you leave college with, say, $50,000, $85,000 in loans? Late last year, Dr. Ron Hira of Howard University published an article in which he talked about how companies save anywhere from 20 to 40% on these H-1B visa workers. So that's who our college graduates are competing with, not to mention all the postdocs on the OPT visa. So Yeah, it's really, these are treacherous waters. Our productive class are being forced to navigate these days, and completely unnecessary. I got to believe it's only about profit.
Well, yeah, and that's what I stated at the very beginning, at the outset, that it's strictly about profit, and it's also the fact that these cuts that are being made right now are not being made to people who are the fluff. They're being made. These cuts are being made to people who are productive and who are actually belong in the company. And after some period of time, you just have to look at it and just shake your head, like, just wonder what's happening. I don't think that IBM retained its competitiveness because of what they've done and how they've structured their workforce. I really don't. I don't believe that they're anywhere near as competitive. They're not the behemoth that they were before. They're not the heavyweight player anymore. And I realize that it's not just about the workforce distribution. There's a lot of other things involved with it, but that is one of the factors there.
I'll relate to a story this week, a personal anecdote where I had to call my health insurance carrier and get a document for an IRS document, well, a document for the IRS so that my employees could file their income tax. Now, I went through the phone tree system, which was really annoying for starters. And then I got someone who was obviously not an American citizen and spoke decent English. And I knew it was a foreigner because, well, they always addressed me as Mr. Kevin. People usually address me as Mr. Lynn or Kevin, but not Mr. Kevin. Now, this is a situation that should have been able to be resolved immediately. But the person on the other end hemmed and hawed, and then after about 15 minutes of me being on hold, I got cut off. So I had to go through the phone tree system again. I got another person who referred to me as Sir Kevin.
That's funny.
So at this point, I'm getting irritated, and I'm on hold again, and I get dropped again. Now, I call back. And I insist on speaking to someone in the continental United States. And I got a woman named Christine, and within 5 minutes, I had my document. And I got to believe millions of Americans are going through this every day when they need some kind of support from one of their either it's a professional service provider or it's some kind of service support. And this is what they're finding at the end of the phone. And much like you were saying about IBM, this all impacts the productivity of the country and the ability of companies themselves to have a feedback loop. So, I mean, I wanted to do a survey and tell them how bad they were, but my fear was that it would reflect badly on the woman, Christine, and not the two people that had dropped me prior. So there's really no feedback loop. So, and I see this happening in healthcare, insurance, financial, as you mentioned, financial services, accounting, as you said. So this is, we're not getting that information where businesses on a very granular level are not able to improve. So that's got to be cause.
Oh, not able to improve. They're deteriorating. It's causing them to lose their competitiveness. It's even worse than not able to improve. It's doing damage.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely right. Well, Adele, we talked about Intel. I'm glad you made it clear that it's not just tech workers. It's really white collar workers in general that seem to be impacted by all of this. And
yes.
So, what would you, if you had a group of workers in front of you, and they had been displaced, what would you say to them? What would you tell them to do? How would you tell them to gird up in these times?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and I know that what I'm going to say is pretty controversial, but I think to some extent, and this doesn't apply across the board, that the workers every worker has a responsibility. The onus is on them to make sure that their skills are competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first thing I would say is take some classes, get that certification. There's some in the field there's some that I work in, there's some certifications that are required to have, but others that can really boost your marketability. And it's all about boosting your marketability. Go to people who can help you interview, because a lot of these people have been working in the same company for a long time, and they haven't been out there interviewing, and it's very intimidating when they do. And get some help with your resume. So, there's some responsibility that they have to bear to that too. But having said all of that, assuming that they do all of that and they improve upon things and get their certifications and upgrade their skills and make it competitive, they still may have difficulty because they're competing, and the supply side metric is so way out of whack right now that it makes it nearly impossible for them to compete on any sort of a level playing field. I would also say get involved, speak to their congressman, because you can affect change. Grassroots activism has been around since the beginning, and that's what formed this country, was a grassroots activist group. And it's how you affect change. It's how you affect change. It doesn't happen overnight, but the wheels of change do happen. And it starts with awareness.
Right, and that's one privilege that a citizen has. We can petition our government for redress. And you made me think of a conversation I had almost 2 years ago. I was talking with a recruiter in California, and they did a lot of work for the government of the state of California. And this gets to your skills issue, because she said, there are things people can do on the state level. Because, for instance, the state of California will say, okay, we have a IT position to fill, and they need to have a bachelor's degree, or they need to have this and this certification. Well, a lot of Americans may not have that bachelor's degree or certification. Now, it would be great if on a state level, tech workers should get the state to respond and say, wow, or show us comparable work product or years of experience. Because what she was telling me, she was seeing all of these employment visa holders, H-1Bs, OPTs, L-1s, and I am not lying when I say this. She said she saw the same resume for 3 different people, because what they have is, on paper, they have all these certifications and degrees and everything. I don't think there's a lot behind them, but they have them. So that, so that just kind of gives more weight to what you were saying. Definitely, keep those skills sharp, and there's also, there's things people need, the softer skills, like learning to be resilient. I'm one of these people that, my fortunes have gone up and down. If not for friends, I would be out on the street a couple times in my life. So, we also have to all get resilient, but I think we really have to gird up and understand the only solution to this is a political solution.
In the long term, that is the only way. It is the only way. Even if they get another job, chances are very, very high the next job that they get and subsequent after that, every job after that is going to be lower and lower and lower paying and less responsibility. So basically, it's a very downward spiral that they have to stop. And the only way to stop that is by increasing their own marketability vis-a-vis certifications. And so they're competing against people who on paper have it, the other people can't deliver. They can, and eventually employers do find out. They eventually do, and I've seen a lot of that. I do contracting work, and I just in general don't compete all that much against the H-1Bs, because what I do is I'm hired because of my communication skills to communicate with senior level people. So that's what I'm hired to do, and I'm hired for very high profile types of projects, and that doesn't largely in any way whatsoever compete with a lot of the foreign H-1Bs. But having said that, I know a lot of my friends are doing them. The friends that I know who their communication skills maybe aren't as good as they should be, or alternatively, they may come off in a way that they don't intend to, like they may come off very low energy, or they may come off as being too depressed or down, or, not being able to keep up with people who are younger than they are. It's about perception. So I think that's where practicing, that's where taking the responsibility themselves really makes a difference, because on paper, they may be equal if they spend the time to get that certification, but when they get there, they have to really impress them that they're the ones to hire and they're the ones to get the job. Otherwise, they're going to fall into that downward spiral. It is almost a guaranteed.
Well, on that note, Adele, I want to thank you very much for joining me this evening. This podcast, as I said, it's April 3rd. I will have this up on April 4th, and a link to it will be in our newsletter. I'm also going to include a link to a blog from last year that I did with John Miano, which is basically gives you ideas of what to do when you've been H1 booted. I referred to it a little earlier in the podcast. And I want to thank our listening audience. If you like this, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to our U.S. Tech Workers YouTube channel, as well as go online and sign up for our newsletter. And for those of our fans out there who have been donating on our site, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's those donations that allow us to keep going and allow us to have these great conversations like I did with Adele tonight. So Adele, thank you. Thank our audience, and have a great night and be safe out there.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye.